This is a multi-volume set of books detailing how railways in Britain primarily operated in 1912, the year of its publication. And what I'm aiming to do is to show, to give details of how these different sections of railway companies operated according to this book, so as to give a picture of those operations before the First World War, the Great War, 1914 to 1918. This was probably the golden era of railways, certainly in the British Isles, and often there are sort of ways of working which have been lost or just people just aren't aware of. So this first one is the way in which the goods department is dealt with, and I'm going to go through this using the book to give me the main points. And these are I'm showing you all of the illustrations that appeared in that particular section of this volume. This is from volume 2 of the set. I think there's about 9 volumes in the set altogether. So the way in which it's structured is that there is a goods manager, and he deals with all the sort of main staff appointments and the principle and the routine of running the overall goods department of the company, and then the day-to-day routine is left to his subordinates. He's got 2 assistants, one of which is the indoor assistant and the other is the outdoor. And so the indoor assistant deals with all the sort of administration and with the charges for handling goods and rebates and claims and questions relating to the railway clearinghouse, which is a topic I might come to in a future video. But he also has to sort out all about the commercial section of the railway's operation with regard to goods. The indoors man, as I say, the assistant goods manager indoor, he handles all of the rates that are charged for all the different types of goods, and there are thousands of local rates usually included in the railway rates book. So here we have the chart showing the organisation of the goods department, and you can see chief goods manager at the top, and then the 2 assistants, one for indoor work and one for outdoor work, and it's the indoor work I'm thinking of at the moment. But they also are both with the chief goods manager in charge of the district goods managers, who in turn look after the local goods agents, and then we have a series of clerks under them, and finally we get down to the people who actually do the work, which is the foremen, the porters, the shunters, the checkers, the sheeters, that is the ones who cover the goods wagons with protective sheeting. But going back to the rates that they charge, the fixing charge for the railway conveyance of goods at that stage was classified by Parliament into 8 divisions, being based on the value and the nature of the commodities. And this is a page from actually from the London and North Western Railways classification of goods, and you'll see here this is just from the part of the letter M, and this aims to cover all of the different aspects or everything that can be carried by the railways. So we've got there, for example, one of the major ones at the bottom of the first column is malt, and that is given the classification of CG, and then there's subdivisions of that with all the different ways in which malt, which is used for the making of beer and other potable liquids, and you can see all the different ways then at the top of the second column, in cake form, as extract, malt extract. I suppose that today would be things like Marmite and Bovril. Malt as a food dried in tins, and there's various numbers and various letters, and those are the classifications. So that's the way in which they dealt with it, and that's because railways in 1912 were common carriers. That is, they were expected to carry all forms of freight that was offered. They couldn't pick and choose. They had to accept it. So in 1912, that means very valuable business. But by the time that competition from roads in the 20s and 30s, and certainly after the Second World War kick in, well, they're usually not common carriers, the freight companies operating on the road, so they can cream off the best of the freight business and leave all the rest, the stuff with very little profit to the railways. But anyway, back in our Edwardian period, period, or George V, we've got a whole series of different categories there. Class 1 includes everything from machinery of all types. Class 2 is bales of yarn. 3 is stuff goods, that means stuff being any form of cloth. Then we've got spirits and furniture. These are all numbered classes. They're subdivisions within the overall groups of B and C. A, B and C. A is usually the mineral and bulk traffic, the lowest rate, like coal, manure and minerals in raw state. B and C are heavy traffic, as I said, but they tend to comprise iron and steel goods, foodstuffs, anything in really large compartments. And then those letter classifications go right the way down to the letters S and beyond. So there's a very large selection of what those rates could be. The bulk of the traffic is carried at special rates, at particular rates, and it's the indoor traffic goods manager who has to determine these rates. For example, it says in the book here, there may be a special lot of bricks for building purposes to be conveyed when the ordinary rate from the brick fields to the town is prohibitive, and in order to obtain the traffic it's necessary to quote a specially low rate, which will secure the business and still leave a margin of profit to the company. So that's pretty clear. If they're running a lot of trains from, they're calling it a brick fields, wherever they're making the bricks, these brick fields are set up anywhere near where there's major construction work at the early part of the 20th century. So therefore they want to win the traffic, so they try and set a special rate. If there's 2 companies carrying between the 2 places, then it was normal for both companies to agree the same rate between the same points and actually just share the business between them. So although there's a bit of collusion, the rates still have to be commercially viable, both for the railway company and indeed for the person or the company that's having the goods shipped. So this was all one of the things that one of the aspects they had to take in consideration. The indoor assistant, what else does he do? Well, he has to look after the trader's outstanding accounts. So it's no good just sending off your bricks and and you receive your bill and then you don't pay it. You've got to pay it. And that's what the indoor assistant is chasing all the time, all the different accounts, all the multitude of people who are using the railway to ship their goods, or companies to ship their goods. And the other thing is there is no real standardisation. Much of the goods in the early part of the 20th century bricks for example are stacked by hand. There's no pallets, there's no containers. There are some basic moves towards containerisation, but that really varies from company to company. There's no agreement between the companies at this stage to do that. The assistant goods manager outdoor is responsible for the actual movement of all the freight, the transit of the goods traffic, and he controls the formation of the goods trains to a large degree, which is run with the in coordination with the superintendent's department for the actual running of the trains. And that's because they had the superintendent's department actually is fully responsible, but it has to be negotiated with the assistant goods manager outdoors, because you've got to have a single control of trains which run over the same metals, and therefore it's only when the goods trains are actually in the goods yard that they're in charge of the outdoor goods manager. As soon as they emerge from the goods yards onto the running lines, they're under the control of the superintendent of the line, who controls the timetable and signalling and all the rest of it. So the assistant goods manager outdoor is the person overall responsible for all those goods yards that you might see on old railways, and which now have largely disappeared. But that's the way the organisation usually operated, and it's the duty of the outdoor goods manager to watch the goods train mileage, the number of miles run by goods trains and even by individual wagons. So there's an immense amount of data collected by the outdoor goods manager's department, which is then all collated back in his office. And of course this is all by hand, there's no computers, there are basic adding machines, but beyond that statistics are all created by, well, they are created by computer, but they're humans. And that was the original meaning of the term computer, was somebody who computed. And you would find these clerks, lots and lots of clerks in these different departments. In fact, if you go back in this video and have a look at the chart showing the organisation, you'll find that in the just below all the local goods agents there's chief clerks, clerks and messengers, for inward, outwards, accounts, and that's a large number of the administrative staff, the office staff of the goods department. And the outdoor goods manager also deals with any complaints about goods in transit, traces the journey of particular consignments if they've gone missing or if they're short on arrival. He's the one who initiates all that sort of investigation. Excuse me. And also he's the one who arranges for the transfer of bulky or awkward items such as boilers, bulky machinery, anything that needs special loading and careful handling when in transit. So he's concerned with sort of like fresh food, vegetables of all types, fruits in particular, and also he's chasing up things like demurrage charges. That is when a company wagon is put into a local goods yard for the recipient, and then the recipient basically uses it like a warehouse. So he wants the wagon turned around very quickly, and it can be as much as 3 shillings per wagon per day in 1912, which is a very substantial sum. And of course no additional charges if it's an open wagon which has a sheet over the top to protect it. If it's a closed wagon, then the rate would be higher. And he's also responsible for making sure that wagons that have come from other railway companies, of which there are several hundred in the British Railways before the First World War, that they get moved back to the parent company, to the owning company, as quickly as possible, because demurrage charges can operate between the companies as well. And he's also responsible for making sure that goods, when they're delivered to the local station, are transferred onto some sort of delivery vehicle, usually horse-drawn at this time, a road van, and taken round to the recipient, or that the goods are put into a secure warehouse, secure goods shed, and kept locked, kept safe until they can be picked up by whoever is due to receive it. But one thing that strikes you about these the handling of goods before the First World War is how completely non-uniform all the loads are. And you'll see this from the photographs, because I'm just using the photographs as they appear in the book. And so there's a lot of handling. So a lot of these people, these men working in the goods department who come under these goods managers, are handling such a variety of different types of parcels and packages and barrels and boxes, and so it's a very labour intensive enterprise, very high large number of workers just to transfer the freight from point to point. So we sort of think of freight trains as goods trains as, you know, like sort of busy, driver, fireman, guard, etc. But the numbers at each end and at intermediate points where goods are transferred can be really substantial indeed. Other information which the local goods guards journals, which are made up and then eventually go back to the headquarters of the railway. Every train has to have a report sent back with the date, the train number, which comes from the working timetable, the name of the driver, the engine number, the times of arrival and departure at all the different stations, especially if it's dropping off en route, all delays and how they were caused, what number of vehicles were attached or detached at each station. And then we've got the way bills, which are filled out and are attached to each wagon or van, and that conveys the information that is needed by the different goods porters en route, and the shunters and those dealing with the wagons in the freight yards. The railway operates a series of local goods depots. These are in charge of a goods agent, and he has his own indoor and outdoor assistants, and they have quite a lot to do, just keeping the whole business. They're moving the freight through as fast as they possibly can, receiving it and dispatching it. And I'm including a statement showing the average rate of wages at provincial goods depots this is in about 1910, and it gives you an idea of the number of different jobs that they have to do, the numbers of different positions that there are to fill, and also the wages which they're receiving, the weekly wage. So for example, for an engine shunter devoting to the goods work, he's getting £1.06 a week. The sheeter, who's actually fixing the sheets over the wagons, he's getting £1.01. Who else have we got here? We've got a lad porter, so he's going to be in his early to mid-teens, 10 shillings. And you can see from the little chart that they're eligible for promotion to the next stage up in the great scheme of things. But forwarding traffic and dealing with all the paperwork is a very lengthy process, or rather an intensive process, because the whole aim is to keep material goods on the move, and not to occupy trains too long, not to be too slow. And there's a whole series of checking, weighing, consigning, preparing the weigh bills and the goods themselves. So for example, at one of the depots, I think it's the one that's in the book is Camden Goods Depot, now long gone of course, and the sort of work that they're expecting to do, and it's normally night work, handling all the different goods, is 16 tons of goods per man each night, and they're distributed across the entire workforce of course, and a lot of that they're not actually shifting personally 16 tons, but they're dealing with 16 tons per man per night, and that's the way in which the whole stuff can be kept moving, kept being prepared up, made up, and then shunted into the transit sidings or the sorting yards ready for dispatch. When they receive traffic, they basically receive the consignment notes at different stations with the wagons and the vans, and they've got a list of all the materials that should be included. A lot of them are mixed loads, and there's a large proportion of loads which are not single wagon loads. That is, they don't entirely fill one wagon all with one consignment, so a lot of them are mixed consignments going to different places within the catchment area of a particular station. And one of the consignments you'll see in the photographs is a consignment of rabbits. It says here at a country goods station, which are being sent on. I'm assuming the rabbits are dead unless they're alive and in those wicker containers. Wicker containers were very widely used across the railways, and so if you're modelling that sort of scene, you want to include a lot of those. And others would be things like barrels. A lot of barrels are used for all types of material, and for example, one of the pictures in this is hogsheads, that is very large barrels of tobacco, which goes into the London and North Western Company's bonded warehouse, I think Hayden Square, and bonded because it's under security, and it's checked, and obviously to make sure that any taxation is paid, any fees are paid for the transfer of this. And goods which then are sent through this whole system, having been dispatched from one place, paid in money paid perhaps in advance, a small sum paid in advance, but certainly the order is accepted, and the company or the individual who's dispatching the goods is in good standing with the company. In other words, they know he's going to pay, or they're going to pay in the end. Those then, having put into the goods vehicles, are then taken to whichever station they require to go, and then they're distributed by the goods depot at that station. The other area which is highlighted in the book about the way you operate the goods department is the accounts office, which is a very complex business indeed, but it brings together, it collates all the charges that are made and makes sure that payments are received. And finally, there's a number of sort of peripheral areas which come under the goods office of the railway in 1912, and these include a horse keeper in most goods depot, responsible for looking after the stables and all the horses, because many thousands of horses are used by the railway companies of the British Isles at about this period, and so they need to look after the horses and make sure they're ready to go out onto the wagons or the road cars, and the draysmen who drive those then are responsible for taking the goods from the goods shed. They receive all the details about what those goods are and where they're to go, and they have to have them signed for, and obviously make sure it's not a short wait or stuff goes missing. And finally, the other area are the policemen, and the policemen actually supervise, they police the goods department in the sense of making sure goods aren't stolen either by somebody from outside of the railway, or indeed railway staff, pilfering by railway staff. So they have jurisdiction within the company's property, but they have no jurisdiction beyond that. But there's normally one or two policemen at most local goods depots, and if not more, and they will come under, the company has its own police superintendent who is responsible for the organisation and discipline of the whole police staff on the line. And you'll have seen from the pictures, which all date to just after the year 1900, that the goods department of any railway operating in Britain during that period is very labour intensive indeed, employing a large number of people who are constantly moving the freight traffic around and looking after it when it's in storage in the company's goods depots. And also that's in addition to all of those who are employed just moving the wagons about, using wagon hoists. For example, there's a picture of a wagon hoist at Broad Street Goods Station, London North Western Railway. Well, that's Broad Street itself, as well as the goods station, is just history now, just completely disappeared. And also there's another illustration showing shunting wagons using turntables, goods turntables at Camden Goods Station, because all of these people come under the administration of the railway goods department. And so if you're modelling any railway from that period, you want to think very carefully about why there are goods sidings, why there are goods depot, and make sure that you include all the different aspects that go together to constitute the goods department, because that way you'll have a much more realistic railway layout in trains or whatever, rail sim, than just by plonking a goods shed down and running a siding to it and saying, right, that's it. Well, I hope that's been of interest to something about the goods offices there, and it's from, as I say, from a period that we don't normally sort of think about, and yet the golden age of railways in the British Isles, and one which I think is absolutely fascinating. And so if you have any comments or questions, please do post them for this video, and I'll aim to respond. And if you I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have, then please do subscribe to my channel, and I shall aim to add additional videos based on this collection, this multi-volume set of books, and to cover other aspects of the railway which we might not necessarily think of as beyond actually running the trains and operating as some sort of passenger and freight service. That's much more detailed, much more complex